Welcome to Ask For It, a podcast about owning your career from interviews to promotions and everything in between. Hosted by Amit Trivedi, ex-Salesforce and founder of High Performa. Every week we get into the mindset, strategy, and confidence it takes to grow on your own terms. On today's episode, we're going to be tackling one of the trickiest parts of the interview process, the salary expectation question. This episode will be 2 parts, so this week we'll be talking about how to answer that when you're still in the interview stage, and then next week we'll be talking about how to answer that when you're already in a role and you have performance reviews coming up, or you have a promotion, and you're looking to see how you can ask for a salary increase. Alright, so let's get started. So whether you're early in your career or you're negotiating for a senior role that you applied for, being asked what are your salary expectations can feel like a trap. And it doesn't have to be. So today I'm going to give you a clear strategy, a few sample scripts, and confidence boosting tips to help you answer that question without underselling yourself or freezing on the spot. So let's dive in. First, let's understand why employers are asking you about your salary expectations. And it's not always about trying to lowball you. And in fact, there are 3 main reasons this question comes up quite early in the process. So 1, it's for budget alignment. Your employers want to know if you're in the same ballpark as what they're budgeted. 2, it's a perceived value. The way you answer this question will actually signal how you value your own experience. And 3, efficiency. If you're way above or below what they're offering, it just won't make sense to move forward. And you shouldn't want to either if your expectation is higher and they're willing to pay much lower. So the key takeaway here is how you answer will say a lot about how confidently you own your self-worth. Alright, before I get into how to respond strategically, let's talk about a few common mistakes that I tend to see a lot when people are asked this question. So mistake number 1 is giving a number too early. If you haven't learned enough about the role, the team, or the company, that means you're guessing, and that's risky. And I know it's tough because sometimes on a screening call with the recruiter or the employer, they tend to ask you first what your expectations are, and in a moment I'll show you how to reframe that to work to your advantage. Mistake number 2 is saying I'm flexible without context. It's good to be flexible, but being vague isn't. And if you sound unsure, it can work against you. And I know people always say that when they ask about salary expectations, don't just give a hard number and say I'm flexible, but I'll show you shortly how to do that. Mistake number 3 is undervaluing yourself out of fear. Don't shrink your ask just because you really want the job. You can still be enthusiastic and confident in your number, but you don't want to lowball yourself just to get the job and then find out you're unhappy, you feel underpaid, then you end up leaving it. So it's better just to be upfront about this process so that both of you are making the right decision on if that role is a fit. So how should you respond? And let's break it down based off of 2 scenarios on how they could ask. So scenario 1 is you get asked this question early in the interview process. So if they asked you before you had a full chance to understand the role you're applying for, this is how you can respond. I'm still learning more about the role and responsibilities, so I prefer to discuss compensation once we both determine that there is a strong fit. That said, I'm looking for a competitive offer that reflects my experience and the market. Okay, so in that answer there, you can see how we took a step back because it's still initial screening. You also want to understand the company better. But you did say that you're looking for a competitive offer that will align. And as a result, you kind of shifted the question back to them for them to give you more of clarity on what the role is and what those competitive market rates may look like. All right, scenario 2 is that they really press you for a number. And here you don't have to play on the defense and you can ask strategically. So this is how you could respond if your first one is not enough and they're really saying like, okay, but you need to give us a range. So this is what you can say. Based on my research and scope of the role, I'd expect something in the X to Y range, but I'm open to discussing the full compensation package. All right, so this answer here shows that 1, you've done your homework. 2, you're reasonable and flexible. And 3, you're open to a broader offer. Because pay doesn't only come with just your salary, it also comes with benefits, bonuses, equity, and growth. And so by saying that you understand the full package, you're also aiming yourself with more education on how you're going to be compensated. And remember, in any way that you're answering those questions, confidence in your delivery is everything here. Okay, so now let's talk about how to research your range. And there's a lot of resources here that you can use. So, for example, one of the great ones is to use Glassdoor, LinkedIn Strategy. You can do levels.fyi, which is great for tech roles. And you can also just ask some peers and mentors that you trust. I'm not suggesting to go out and ask people what they make, but if you have a friend who's in a similar role, you can ask them, if you're comfortable, on what you should expect to be receiving or what kind of range you should be prepared to go in with. And you want to gather two numbers. You want to have your must-have minimum and then your ideal target. And so when you're coming up with your must-have minimum, make sure it's not too low and it's something that you'd be happy to accept. Because in some companies, the way you get hired is based off of a band within that role level. And at times, they may start you off at the lowest on the band and then give you that room to grow. But you need to be okay with the lowest part of that number before accepting. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one more bonus tip. And that's saying, what if you've had several rounds of interviews and they've never brought up salary? And I know you must be wondering at this point, is it worth my time to continue? What if I go all the way through and find out it's really low? And you can ask, you can totally ask what the salary is. And this is how I would recommend you say it. As we're progressing in the process, I'd love to better understand the compensation range for this role. Can you please share what's budgeted? This response here shows maturity, clarity, and that you value your time as well as their time. All right, let's wrap it up. So salary talks can feel intimidating, but with the right mindset and language, they don't have to be. Remember, don't give the number too early. Do your research before you provide a number, and speak from a place of clarity and confidence, no matter where you are in the cycle. And if you don't have clarity and you want to know what the salary is, just ask for it. Next week, we'll be talking more about how to ask for a salary renegotiation or how to ask for a boost when you're already in role and looking to level up. And as a bonus to this episode, I created a free downloadable salary script guide that has word-for-word responses you can use. And so you can grab that at my website, thehighperforma.com, and it's linked in the show notes. All right, well, thank you all for tuning in and see you next week. Thank you for listening to Ask For It. If this episode was helpful, I'd love if you subscribed and shared it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're ready for a bit more support, I do offer one-on-one coaching. The link's in the show notes if you want to check that out. Until next time, keep showing up and don't forget to ask for it.